Chapter 10. The Stand. As the broken foundation of the gingerbread house stood before them, Cupcake and Carrot Cake faced many decisions. The broken foundation sat on the clear white counter top, while the forlorn gingerbread house itself stood on its sanction. An upturned baking rack pressed it to a new function. Both awaited their choice. There were many possible ways of going about the repair, but one must be chosen. One course of action must probably be upon, or the whole project could soon be reduced to rubble. The two ponies looked at one another. In an instant, Cupcake was going through various cupboards. Carrot saw her gathering up baking clothes. Carrot realized what she was doing. He saw the look of depression across her face as she began to make her plans. Cupcake was preparing to make more gingerbread, to start a new batch. She looked at him and began to speak. At that moment, new voices rang out in the showcase room. At once they both turned towards the door, but she pointed once more to the frosting that still stood resolutely upon his nose. The two looked at one another, she painting a small smile of comfort, and then quickly went to see to the customers. Carrot turned back to the gingerbread house, saw the agreement on the layout. She wanted to take the safe route, the route that would lead to the foundation being remade and reset. But he knew that would take time. Time to knead, time to chill, time to shape the dough and bake it. Time. Time was already working against them. Carrot took a deep breath and looked around his kitchen. Their kitchen. Upon the table, the various utensils they had been using sat. Some already covered with sticky remains of dough or coated with the same batch of frosting that they still remained upon his nose. If he wished to have this project done in time to present it, to capture the meaning of what this special order had meant for them, then he would need time. He did not have time to begin anew. He would make this decision. He would go forward right now as best as he knew how. Carrot looked to the baking rack where the long discarded pieces had broken off the gingerbread stood. To his alarm, he had heard the gingerbread house give the slightest creaks, or it began to protest the absence of its critical component. With that, he grabbed up the trimmed gingerbread and was grateful that he had not yet thrown them away. As he did, he laid them into the old broken foundation, measuring them against the cracked surface. In one motion, he lifted the bowl of thick frosting, the same type she had used to make the dollop that still rested on his nose. He began to rebuild the foundation, Carrot making his choice, deciding to force the issue and bring the project back around, to find a way they could go forward together without surrendering all that they had won. It had been a miserable 2 weeks. The mud of early spring still clung to ponies as they walked down the street. As they entered the bakery, their cursory efforts to wipe the mud from themselves failed to win anything but the slice of false smiles for Carrot. As he mopped up under them, he wondered if his customers were intensely avoiding walking down the cobblestone streets to give him something to do. It was as though the ponies who walked out of his bakery with their cakes and croissants were attempting to draw him out of his reflection, help him avoid the realization of what was happening around him. The bakery was empty. She was not there, and it was far, far more than just her helping hose that he missed. Knaps had taken her back, had been wonderfully understanding and quick to offer a spot on her staff to one who had proven her worth before. Karen had actually met her, Cupcake bringing her employer around to meet him and see the bakery he had been working so very hard to establish, been trying so very hard to give a strong foundation. As he saw Knaps around, he could sense the unicorn beginning to understand something had gone wrong, that there was something hovering between them. As they wished her goodbye, they stood in the doorway. Standing there in the spot where they had shared their first kiss brought to mind how far they'd come together, how far they still had to go. He lowered his head to her and made little motions to ask for her touch. She replied just as willingly as ever, still sought his contract, but the heaviness was still there. No matter how gently he rolled his nose to hers, no matter how lightly he touched his face to hers, the fear would not come out. He could not draw the worry out of her. What else is a stallion for? Cupcake, he worried. There has to be some way. I mean, if we talk to your father, can it? She breathed as she laid her head across his withers. My father sees the world 2 ways. You're either family and friend, or an enemy waiting a chance. He began to slowly sway, let his motion rock her as she spoke of growing up in a house where the love of her father, strong and palpable, could in a moment descend into a whirlpool of rage and wrath that would send her and siblings galloping to her rooms in fear. Though never directed at them, unless in the most dire situations, such as when her older brothers had been playing with fireworks and burned down the bar, it was still what surrounded them, defined him. As the two ponies laid there, Cupcake told him about all the ponies who had stolen him from her father, how his cynicism ruled him and made him see the world in white and blood red. He loves me, Cat. Loves me as any father does, she said as she moved her head from his withers, once more placed him all on his chest. I miss the little Cupcake. With that, she told him of those days after her mother began having seizures, told him about how her body began to fail around her as the magic of Pegasus sought her, set upon her Pegasus genes that lay hidden deep within the earth pony. In those deep, dark days, she had found her father sitting in the living room, staring deep into the fireplace. My father's a cat, she said. I never seen him cry a day in my life, but... Quiet hung around the house, and as she pondered the massive form of her father, he had given a single sob, the feeling of uneasiness ripping out Quarry and filling the room. She realized that her father was feeling weak, feeling powerless. Those were two emotions that he had fought his whole life to avoid. And now that the mare he loved most in the world was ill, there was no way he could help her, make her well and complete again. What else is a stallion for? With that, Cupcake had gone into the kitchen, decisive and thoughtful as always. And after an hour, she had brought 2 cupcakes. She presented him, one for her and one for her father. He gathered his daughter to him, grasped her in his massive hug. As his father praised his little Cupcake, there had been a sound of falling stars across a frozen lake as she felt quicksilver falling down her flank. Best description of a cutie mark ever! It had been worth waking her mother, waking Wissy well so she could see Cupcake's new mark. It was only after lying with her mother and father in their bed, happily wrapped in their mutual embrace, that she realized she had forgotten to actually eat the Cupcake. As Cupcake had stabbed in the doorway, swaying back and forth together in harmony, he realized that her father and he shared at least one thing: Corey's daughter. Both loved the rose-eyed mare who rested against him lightly. It was a lunch for the Hay Council today, 2 weeks after she had begun with some knaps. She would need to be off soon, to the barn where 2 old ponies would stand around discussing things over which she had no interest. Reluctantly, she lifted her head from his chest, lifted her nose to him once more. As he entered, he felt her make the motion that invited much more. Soon their kisses turned to one another. As they did, Karen fought to drag out some of the pain and worry out of her, asked her with the feel of his lips for her to surrender some of it, to let him take away some of the burden she felt. As he stood, she looked down with her wonderful smile. He stood on 3 legs and watched as she disappeared to the crowded streets of Ponyville. He watched where she had disappeared for a long time. His kiss had once more failed to achieve its purpose. The morning rush was over, and as noon approached, he put away the baking tools that had dried in the dish rack. He closed up the spaces so a few bumbling files would not find their way to what he had made, to the delicate frostings and glazings that sat glistening on his creations. With that, he put away the mop, and instead swept the floor with a broom, carefully catching up all the dried dirt and dust that lay in the hidden places of his bakery. He flung the broom into the closet so it rattled around, fell upon the floor. He kicked at it, sounds of frustration falling out of him as he did. He then flipped the sign on the door to "back in an hour," and as he cursed and made his way up to the stairs. He trotted straight into his bedroom and threw himself on the bed, stared at the ceiling for a long time, maybe an hour without thinking of anything. When he did begin thinking again, it was about his failure to lift that worry from her. She was worried about her father. She was also worried for him. She was worried for Corey, her father that she loved and was afraid of. She was worried for Carrot, her partner, her deepest friend that she loved and was afraid for. She was worried about them, these 2 players in the game of this. Her fears, hopes, dreams, love, these all coalesced in the form of these 2 stallions. Stallions he was concerned for and troubled over. He did not want her troubled. He wanted her happy, smiling, and radiant. He wanted to see the sharp dash of her eye when she was being devious. He wanted to see the way her shoulders came up, and that wicked little smile went across her face, giving us a small, happy scheme. He wanted to hear the sound of her hose across these floors, hear her voice calling to him across the kitchen as he became filled with ideas. He wanted her to hear how her day had gone, wanted her to confide in everything in him, wanted to hear her giggles and her laughter. He wanted to have her near him, wanted her to brush beside him when she was happy, wanted her to lean against his chest and find strength when she was sad and bothered. He wanted to feel her approach, know that in an instant his nose would be to hers, that soon after his lips would be to hers. The feel of her coat went through him, the feel of her hoof touching to his and went over to him as he closed his eyes and sighed aloud to the lonely room. Kara turned to his side and thought of the time she had wanted him to lie here with him upon the bed, how close she had been. In those moments, when she had lain in his forelegs, the roots of their bodies touching to one another, those had been the great reward for him. To feel her so safe with him, knowing that tugged to the crust of his body she had been secure and content. That was all he wanted from her, that she let him wash the concerns out of her, fill her life with happiness, shelter, love. That was fading away. He was losing that. It should have been cathartic for her. It should have been liberating to let him know who his opponent was in the long games he had been playing. It had not been. Instead, it had been as though her fears were now alive. Her grim vision of this competition between her father and her lover now hovered over her in a thick, fictitious cloud. He started to think of how strong it must have been within her this whole time. How often she must have reflected upon those images of him suffering under the rage of quarry. Wish she had told him sooner. Thought that perhaps he had not seemed strong enough. He was strong. Not seemed like it. But he knew his strength. He knew he was strong. It was not physical strength, but he was strong. He sensibly raised himself, in some senses, even kept his mother alive as she had faltered, and failed at her attempts to fill the void within her. He was strong. He ran himself over the side of the bed, knew that no matter how strong he was, it was not going to help. He would lose her, this continued. Their love was strong, but it would be smothered under her fear. The pervasive fear that even his freely given kisses and embraces could not lift. He stood, sighed once more. Before him, the damnable lair still lay on the floor where she had dropped it 2 weeks ago. He looked it over. Quarry's signature now stood upon their relationship like the dead albatross hung around the neck of the condemned mariner. He sighed again and went down the stairs. He reached for the back of the narrow sign, but the instant he put himself upon it, he was caught up in a remembrance. He looked upon Ivory, sitting there in the sun in front of the window as he spoke with him, told him some of the truths of the game of this. At that moment he remembered what she had told him, a promise he had made not to reveal Ivory's retreat during a cupcake. "To win the game, Kellett," she had said, "all you have to do is be yourself. You're set up to win. Everyone in this town wants you to win. I want you to win. Cupcake needs you to win." Carrick gasped at his own memory, realizing how right Ivory had been. As his recollection rolled around, his mouth moved in concert with Ivory's. He remembered her words, only then beginning to truly understand what she had been saying. "Do not tell Cupcake I said this under any circumstances," she had spoken, Carrick mimicking her forcible, earnest tone. "You do not always have to wait for permission. At times, it can be even fatal. The time will come when to win this, as you call it. We have to let your love guide you." As he remembered Ivory's hug, the want and wish she had conveyed for her best friend settled through him. With that, a thought went through Carrot. He could not always be the pawn, the piece being moved. You had to make a move, had to be the one to advance the action of the game. The relationship could not survive long if she was so worried. She could not endure the facade that she had built. She did not want to keep up the farce, and he knew she would be crushed under it. The longer a lie is drawn out, the worse it becomes. 2 years of this would wound her. His mother's words shot through him, the warning she had given Cupcake as he had hidden in the doorway. Love could be drowned, lost. No, he would not allow it. He would risk all on the throw of a dice, make a surprise move. He would save her from worry, and not through his quiet embrace and soft touch, but through the shouts and rays of her father. He would risk all that he had built on a single throw, risk letting it all come crashing down. Carrot scampered up the stairs, grabbed up the ladder, and once more pelted down them. Quickly, he turned the sign to close and threw the door open. For some reason, he decided on a bathroom break, which would prove fortuitous. Before stepping out into the afternoon, he turned and looked back over his bakery. Strings of causality leaped out and laid before him in loose tangles, any one of them being the endpoint of what was now the undertaking. Some ended him with returning to this place a broken, weeping, bleeding mess. Some ended with her mad at him, begging him to tell her why he had done it, wondering how they could get her mother mad at them both. Some ended him with hobbling around the bakery years from this day, leaning on a cane. One alone ended with him never returning, ended with shocked whispers outside the door, invoking an unspeakable cry. Yet some ended with him looking into the rosy eyes, feeling her soft kisses planted against him as her lips laid against his back, felt the treble nibble on his ear, the sound of her giggles echoing around the bakery. With that visited upon him, he let down to the early afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, the following scene will involve one example of one of the most manliest bits of manhood you will ever see on this show. Enjoy. Corey was working on the garden patch, trying to get the good earth to accept his offerings of the old eggshells. Plants need calcium, or so he was told. Being as he was an earth boy, Corey dug deeper, trying to call upon the magic that served him in business, anchoring him both in times of thought and at times when he was without the calmness that now supposedly floated over him. Supposedly. In reality, all he really felt was an intense dislike for eggshells. He was an earth pony. He called upon that connection now, asked the magic to flow through him to the earth, as though through the earth to him in return. As he worked through the garden patch, he simply felt himself digging deeper, feeling his muscles working as his strength played out through the soil. The garden had been suggested by Ledger and encouraged by Wishing Well. It was an attempt to help him find something to help deal with the wrath that he knew was far too inside him to really be removed. Instead of the calm that he had assured him would follow, he had begun to this project. All he really felt was a bizarre sort of self-consciousness, an embarrassment that came from nowhere, as he realized he nearly spent an hour in the hot spring sun, digging a trench about 4 feet deep and 6 long to bury an adult about 4 eggs worth of crushed shells. Good afternoon, came a small voice, one that was familiar and instantly grating. Good afternoon, Mr. Corey. It rose again. Close side, Corey turned to face the cake. The face of the cake cult stood there, staring over the fence. Corey studied the cult for a second. As he did, he saw Cake lift a little paper hat that he assumed he wore around his bakery. Cake, he answered. His rear hoof moved a big metal watering can behind a pile of dirt. His gaze fell over the cult once more, and Cake lowered his hat as he withered. Corey walked down the gate, his dirty hair sunning along the path. Corey looked over to Kate and looked down at Carrot, as the smaller smiling and tried to smile back. Ain't never seen you up this end of the city before, spoke Corey, looking past Carrot. No, sir, said Carrot as he gulped a little. I only come as far as the lampposts, as far as the lampposts or so. Don't want to risk you seeing. I don't want to disturb you too much. Corey's eyes fell back down on the colt, his gray eyes meeting the green of the colt in a passive glance. What do you want, Cake? He said in a small breath that washed over Carrot, filling his nose. I've got to ask a favor. Knowing right away it was the wrong word to choose. Carrot sensed right away that for the stallion, favors were for friends. Business only meant deals, contracts, and backstabbing. Or, actually, sir, I need permission for something important, said Carrot as he quickly rephrased his words. The gray eyes narrowed upon him. You know, at this moment, this guy's scarier than Titan. And remember, Titan was a god. Rather than continue under the threat of those eyes, Carrot pulled the letter out from under his hat. He held it in his mouth so Corey could see the conversation was about. Corey closed his eyes and gave a sneer. The Carrot's surprised, he turned and walked a few paces back toward what looked like either a garden a construction project and pawed at the earth.
I don't talk about business in my home, Cake,
Corey says he lifted deep into the watering can. He realized he'd forgotten to bring any water. As the cake call continued, he put his side end inside as his teeth began to grate. I'm sorry, sir. Well, it's really important. You see, I'd like for you to continue with my loan. I'd like you to keep it instead of sell it to the new company, Carrot called, having to lift his voice slightly to reach Corey, where he now stood. The chant called the elder step contrast to the black of the turned earth.
And why would you want a fool thing like that, Cake?
Called Corey, single, agitated stomp, then left a deep print in a pile of dirt.
Says right there on the letter. Why, it'd be better for you to go with them, slick colts.
Yes, sir, answered Carrot, lifting the cap again, placing the letter beneath. But it's kind of important to me that you know I'm responsible. It's really important to me that you know I keep my promises. I have to take care of what's important to us both. Carrot stopped as he saw Corey stomp again, turned down the path back to the gate as his newly blackened host sounded out loudly.
Damn it, Cake!
Called Corey. Always doubted the cult's business savvy, but this was simply too much. How he would want to go on and explain about how he wanted Corey's trust for this or that. Soon he'd be discussing chain stores or carrot cake world outlets, some fool notion. It was all the same. They were all the same. He was not going to deal with it. He was gardening.
You ain't making a lick of sense,
he told the colt as his voice sounded safe as a sound.
If you stick with me, that'll cost me about 450 bits. You'll cost yourself more than that. And I ain't going to listen to no excuses when that banker of yours goes under, 'cause you ain't got no horse science.
Corey turned and looked back to his garden. As he heard Cake stuttering, he looked at the trench he had dug for the 4 eggshells. As Cake began to speak again, Corey found himself picturing burying something slightly more amber-colored and unbitten in his garden. He was able to get beyond the image, barely, but the time Carrot spoke again, I'm not going to fail, he said, sounding ever so slightly more confident than he had before. I've got a partner who is smart. We're going to make it. All I'm asking is that you let me prove myself to you. Carrot looked up to see Corey already back at the gate, breathing heavily as his gray eyes once more fell over him.
Cake,
spoke the stallion in a disparaging hiss.
This is the last time I'm going to tell you. Don't talk about business at my home. Get back to your partner. I'm gardening. Once you've actually learned what interests me, you'll talk about it. You got a smart partner? Thanks to Leslie for that. Have him explain it to you. I've got bean plant.
Her, sir, said Carrot. My partner is a mare, the most marvelous one I've ever known. Corey missed a step. As he recovered, he smirked to himself. In 6 months he had presented a loan to the colt. This is the first time he had not stuttered, though. It seemed that he hit upon a nerve with Cake. Corey turned, still on his face.
Well, don't that be all?
Said Corey in an accusing tone.
Kate's got some bacon going on in this kitchen. You buttered up some hot bones, Kate? You too worried about spreading your frosting to manage your business?
Corey smiled a harsh smile, happy to see the colt recoil if it meant he would be off. It was always amazing to Corey to have a business pony who was mixing business and pleasure with flinch when faced with the truth. Corey wondered if the mare was married. That would be a scandal. I wish you hadn't said that, sir, said Carrot with his head still turned, eyes closed, head hanging towards the sidewalk. I really wish you hadn't said that, Mr. Corey. Corey lifted his head. Cake was suddenly not stuttering. Suddenly almost seemed offended. Hurt? Defensive? Interesting. Corey tested the waters, wanted to see how far he could push the colt before he would finally pelt off and give up on trying to fish whatever Cake wanted out of him.
What's the matter, Colt?
Laughed Corey.
You ain't got no trouble coming around to my house to ask me about business. But when I want to know about what you're mixing up with that marry you cupcake.
The name fell out of Carrot. It hung around the fence post, tipping over, crashing around Corey's hooves. The name splintered around them into as many pieces as the eggshells at sea. Carrot opened his eyes and looked up to see a shaking, trembling Quarry. The stallion's mouth hung open, drained the air as hissing breaths followed between them. Carrot, you're a dead man. He did not look the stallion in the eyes. Cupcake, he said as he closed his eyes, picturing her head. Your daughter Cupcake is my partner, sir. We've been working together since we opened the bakery. Since before that, even. She was with me when I first set hoof inside. Went with me when I went to sign the papers. But she's far more important to me than that. Far more important, sir. We've been seeing each other for almost a year, since before you first met me at the mill. We're dating, sir. Close. Intimate. Carrot opened his eyes as he looked upon Quarry. He was reminded of something extraordinary that struck him inside the day he had witnessed it. One day at the mill, the entire staff had been drawn together on the first floor to witness a test. As Trammell dropped a sandbag, the primary safety mechanism of the spiral safe. The device was simple, and it needed to be. If the device was in danger, a cold affiliate being pulled through the machines, then the device was all that could possibly save their life. As the bag had dropped, it pulled brakes into place. Throughout the mill, belts came loose, some flopping horribly and all raising cacophony. Wheels dropped from their active positions into their safety modes, sending a rattling clanging through the mill that bounced off the walls and made ponies cover their ears. Outside, the mill wheel came to a resolute and immediate halt. As it did, the water within splashed about a white torrent and sent streaming across the side of the mill as the powder of the river now splashed against the building. The thrum of it, reaching them even as though it was a brick wall of bricks. If Carrot thought that was a horrific collection of sights and sounds that could be captured in a facial expression, then the one Quarry now represented it fully. I want you to keep my loan, so I can prove that I could take care of, began Carrot. He was very quickly made to stop. Before he could even understand what had happened, he felt himself fighting for breath. Beneath him, cold stones reached up to his chest, and at once the stinging began. Looking to his chest, abdomen, and legs, he saw tiny scratches. Raw spots had erupted to blood that shone through his coat in long lines. He felt something on him. As he looked beneath his forelegs, he saw black dirt clinging to his coat as well. Quarry. Quarry had pulled him over the gate, lifted him bodily along the surface, and dropped into the stones in one raging bellow. Carrot regained his senses, just as the feminines of Quarry's wrath began to settle over him. In the space of seconds, all of the horrors that had shot through his mind since the first day at the mill, when he had seen the stallion use his rays, now descended upon him. He tried to go limp.
You son of a bitch!
Called Quarry as he knocked the paper hat from Carrot's head, sending it and the tumbling across the yard.
You son of a bitch! You're no different than any of them. No bucket different than any of the slime and cults whistling into our lives. Just another bastard who's using my cupcake to try to get to me. Coming around here now acting all sincere.
No, sir. Please, began Carrot, trying to make for his hose. No, sir, as he found his way to his hose, there came another roar. Carrot felt himself slam against the gate, her long, thick metal bars bouncing, clanging in response to his body, being driven against them. He felt himself thrown against them once again as Quarry's voice began to rise higher. Carrot's head went back to himself as he felt himself shoved upon the gates once more. The force of Quarry's shoves lifting him off his hooves, his head bouncing off the bars with a metallic clang. Carrot fought for a breath as stars passed through his vision. As he tried to steady himself, it was to no avail. Quarry was upon him, driving up the path.
You bucking piece of crap! What did you tell her? What did you do to get away with it? She knows! She knows all about your tap. She's had to fight off goat lickers like you for years!
Spat Quarry.
What a mess like you tell her to got to her. What did you tell her? What lies did you whisper in my little cupcake's ears? How did an underbiting, stuttering prick like you?
Garrett fell to his knees. He was shot against the stones. Called in pain. He did not even know if fallen or been kicked. He soon felt himself being dragged to his hooves. And once, he was amid the turned soil in the nascent garden, trying to stay with his toes as Corey raised above him. The stallion was ranting and raging. Inside Carrot, 1,000 different voices called to him to run, to flee for safety. One voice stood firm, though, told him that this was his stand. It spoke to him calmly as the mad stallion pelted him with fury, leveling accusations against him.
You ain't no different after all. No different than any of them. I told Paperclip so. Coming to my office with your bacon, trying to turn her against me too! You other sucker! You sea bucker! Didn't expect no better for some pony wearing a bow tie!
Corey lifted Carrot by the caveat, looked down to Colt who he had held there. Once his Carrot gasped for breath.
No business sense! No sense in clothes! Goes hoof and hoof, eh? You little piece of crap!
Cupcake gave it to me. Hut's Orvin. He choked. Reached his out to gain leverage across Corey's as the large stem pulled at the cravat. Corey's mouth came open. He stood aghast and rolled around. With a single snarl, he lifted Carrot again, shook him again and again and again as he hung from his hooves, dropped the smaller stallion among the dirt in the garden.
Ain't that something? That's a fine piece of gardening, ain't it? Ain't it? You son of a bitch! How do you think she's gonna like hearing you came around today asking for favors, trying to use her to get me something out of me?
The dirt clung to Carrot as he tried to lift himself. Instead, he felt Corey's legs sweep beneath his. With a tumble, he landed in a trench that Corey had dug.
You little bastard! You piece of crap! You leave my daughter alone! You leave my family alone!
Corey stood over him, raging at him once more. He tried to look up. As he tried to blink the dirt out of his eyes, the afternoon sun fell over him. It cast Corey in an outline as the foam and spit of his continued anger dropped onto Carrot.
Colt,
he asked as his voice went high.
Where's your words now, huh? You want to stutter your way through some explanation now?
Please, Carrot cried. I'm not like them. I love her. Please, I don't want anything from your family. I just want to
leave my family alone!
brayed Corey, kicking dirt across Carrot.
Leave us alone!
He called again as he reached for something bulky that stood nearby. Twice, 3, 4 times something large and metallic bounced off of Carrot's head as he tried to turn away. 3, 4, 5 times Corey banged it off of Carrot's nose, calling out hissy screams until the blood began to pour. The Colt began to raise his forelegs to defend himself, but the cursing Corey held him down with his massive frame. In an instant, a ray of ink cells fell over Carrot as he lay in the trench. Finally, the wiring can itself bounced off his stomach, driving the air from him. Corey lifted himself from the trench, looked back down to the heaving, filthy form of Carrot below.
You think we're done, Calic? He hissed. You even held a chance of what I do to who most try to use my family against me. Try to hurt my family.
Please, came a small voice from the trench.
I'm going up to that house,
spat a squeezing, heavy, shaking Corey,
and there I'm getting a drink. Then I'm gonna whip if you're still here when I come out.
With that, he trotted up the path, knowing it needless to continue. Cake would run off like the rest. He was nothing special. So, Cake had been just like them after all. Scheming, devious bastard. He had Cupcake under his spell for a year. That was a sin. A proper sin. But he told her she would be hurt. She would be hurt real bad. Mother would hold her, and at times she would heal. At time to be a cult for her. Not one who thought of money, of using her. That hurt him to think about. As he got his drink, he could not catch breath. He sucked down another mug of cold water. He tried to get his heart to stop pounding. He hopes he found the right cult soon. Some pony who loved her for who she was. Would never hurt her. Never want anything from her. As the ringing in his ears began to fade, he hopes he would do it before he had a stroke or a heart attack. And it was a matter of course. But he grabbed the whip from the closet and began to back outside anyway. Just in case the cult was lingering near the gate, was thinking some explanation. Just like so many others. Chloe? Came a still, small voice. He looked around to see Wishing Well in her wheelchair. She looked at him questioningly, looking to where the whip stood in his mouth and back to his eyes. He dropped it to himself and smiled to her, even as dirt fell from his mane.
There's a big old rat in the garden, love,
he said. With that, he looked at the whip once more and headed for the door. Corey stretched, felt the sun upon him, took a couple of deep breaths. Guarding had proven quite interesting, if not entirely relaxing. Still, enjoyed pulling the weeds. His gray eyes still on the garden, and he jumped in surprise. The cake cult stood there, just beside the garden on the path. He was dirty, filthy, and bleeding. Even as he stood there, the dirt of the garden fell from him, eggshells catching in his mane as he trembled and shook with palpable fear. Corey's jaw slid from side to side as he pondered Carrot. Upon the cult was every discernible mark of fear. The gangly legs shook. From his head to his orange tail, the cult trembled. The teeth inside the underbite chattered. The sound carrying all the way up to the porch. Only a trail of piss running down his leg to complete a scene of abject terror was absent. Yet, there he stood. Ladies and gentlemen, we have seen many signs of manhood and strength throughout this show that we've been on through this long 10 years. We have seen men do a lot of things. We've seen women brave many tasks. And yet, in spite of the fact that there's no super strength, no power, no mecha, no weapons, this has got to be one of the strongest, manliest, most powerful moments on this show's history, and it still has yet to be topped. Yeah, I'm even calling out Gohan from No More Forgiveness. I'm calling out all of Maiken's male characters. This is how a man should act. Be ready to stand by your mare. Ready to take on whatever fear or scare or horror you're willing to take. This is a man. Please note, no powers, no strength, nothing worth a damn. And yeah, he's scared. But this is true heroism. That's always being able to take on with all your power. Sometimes it means doing what you're afraid of for somebody you love. And I know there are a lot of fanfics that could look at this and say, take notes! None of the others had been there when he had come back out. Was Cake really that stupid? Corey stared out over Carrot, saw the colt's eyes forced shut. As he watched the mouth came open, a familiar phrase came wordlessly from the colt's lips. Celestia, help me? Oh, sure. I'll make sure a little twinge of feet here and there. Corey tilted his head back and forth. He had been to cry out that the sovereign does not aid liars when a phrase waited for Cake. Cupcake, I tried so hard. Corey's jaw shifted back and forth for a few long minutes. With that, he gathered up the whip, tried to where the stallion stood. As he stood before the trembling Carrot Cake, he looked the stallion over, saw how worked over he was. Scrapes, welts, dirt, blood, eggshells.
You stupid cake!
Asked Corey as he wrapped the whip around his foreleg and measured out a good striking length. Not so much, sir, said Carrot, fighting to make the words come. Corey shook his head.
Why in the world are you still here, Cake? Do you think I'm alive? Do you think I won't strip the flesh from your head?
No, sir. Yes, sir. I don't know you'll do it, sir. Carrot said as he trembled. Cupcake told me about the other cults.
Then, Cake, damn your ever hide,
said Quarry, facing Carrot in a gaze so hard and close to the smaller stallion's face that his breath caught in Carrot's nose.
Why in the world are you still here?
Quarry stepped back, was amazed to see the trembling, shaking form of Carrot Cake lift itself. He watched as the stallion fought to his full height. Even as the younger stallion shuddered in fear, his green eyes came open and melted gray ones of Quarry. Because, came the smaller stallion's voice, fighting past every instinct of self-preservation that sat inside him. Because I'm not like them. I love her, sir. I love your daughter. I love Cook. There was no sound in the world of baking, like the sound of snapping gingerbread. Carrot thought of that sound as the explosion went across Quarry's face that was otherwise unidentifiable. Quarry's jaw went from side to side as he pondered the younger stallion. Please, added Carrot as he stood quivering upon the path. I'm just asking that you believe me. Let me prove that. Inside Quarry, a moment of doubt was replaced by an old instinct. It was simply not possible. There was no way that money and family mixed. He wanted something. He was a convincing liar. That was all. With that, the whip cracked to the air. Carrot winced to brace himself and felt nothing.
I'm telling you for the last time, leave my family alone, Cake!
Wheezed Quarry, got the whip back to himself. Please, whispered Carrot. With that, the whip lashed out again. This time pain, real and powerful, fell with it as it cracked across Carrot. Carrot felt the sensation go through him, and at once the sting drove him to his knees. Soon he felt something running down his cheek. Quarry had been startled, knew that there was something wrong. He had missed. He only meant one last warning shot to crack about the young stallion, but he had missed. And now he saw blood trickling down the ear of the odd stallion, the groove to where his ear met his head standing wet in the midday sun. He looked upon the stallion and stood upon his path, not knowing what to do, doubt filling him. As Quarry looked on, he saw something that sent him reeling back another step. Carrot fought to his hooves, even as he trembled and stood upon his earth-pawning strength. The stallion, Cake, was using its magic, the gift of the earth itself to anchor him there. Cake was using it to give him strength, to face him. Not launch a futile attack, not flee like all the rest, but simply stand there. Please, asked Carrot as his green eyes flashed open once more. I love her. I love Cupcake, sir. I love her so much. Quarry looked at his hoof. The sound of gingerbread cracking and crumbling sat deep within his features. Inside Quarry, questions began to rise. What could the stallion want from him? What from his family or Lenz's family? So badly he was willing to stand there and face his whip. What could he... Is he really possible that he just... No, it isn't. That's not the way the world works. Quarry lifted the whip again. No! Daddy! No! The voice lifted to him as a shriek crossed 1,000 miles to reach Quarry as he stood there. The gate slammed shut. Out the path came his daughter. She pelted to him as a black apron at a carrying job trailed out behind her. The eyes of both stallions fell upon her as she stripped herself of it, and discarded it as though it were anchor dragging her down. Daddy, no! Daddy, not him, please! She wailed as she let down, clearly wrapping herself around his hoof and dragging him down slightly under her weight.
Cupcake,
he said to regain himself.
Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me about this?
Stop it! Stop it, Daddy! She says, falling away from him as she tripped over her own hooves. As Quarry watched, her face wide with fear, sobs began to fall from her as she looked upon Carrot. The second she had gathered up the apron, was holding it to the blood trickling down his face. Quarry looked upon the unbelievingly as the dark of the apron absorbed the crimson, as she brushed the eggshells from him and said, Oh, Carrot, why did you do this? Carrot, over and over. I'm trying, Cupcake. Lanky Stallion whispered in pain. I'm trying so hard.
Cupcake,
Corey asked in a demanding tone.
why didn't you tell me you was working with him? He's just come up and made a fool of himself trying.
Stop it! Stop it, Daddy! Stop it right now! She calls you once more trod to him, tears falling from her face. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd do this. That you wouldn't believe him. That you hurt him. An old fear grew in Corey. Now that he'd given his daughter a reason to fear him, raising up in a ball that sat in his throat. Daddy! She said while nuzzling beneath Corey. He's not like the rest, Daddy. He doesn't want anything from me. Doesn't care that I'm round.
You're not round!
Came the voices of two stallions, one firm, the other trembling. Corey met the eyes of Carrot. Some foreign feeling was growing in him as the gangly stallion still shook and trembled upon the path. Please, Daddy, please, she continued, still running herself alongside her father with her voice still high with worry. Please, he isn't like the rest.
He just wants to get to me,
spoke the firm voice of Corey, his old instincts and the truths he had learned through his hard life, rising up while fixing Carrot once more in a harsh gaze.
Use you to get to my money.
No, no, no! Corey quailed up as she once more forced herself upon his foreleg, trying to get the whip to drop from where it sat wrapped around his hoof. Daddy, he didn't know you're my father. Not until 2 weeks ago. I planned so hard, fought so hard to keep him from finding out. To keep you from finding out. Daddy, everyone's been trying so hard. But I didn't know about the love. My fault. Please stop hurting him. Cupcake, came the voice of Carrot, and it struck in Corey's ears. It was high with worry and concern. The smaller stallion was worried for her, anxious for her. The sounds of Ace's assumptions and scarred beliefs tension began to falter throughout Corey, and once the old ways rose up and attempted to defend his unhappy view of the world.
You mean you got the whole town, everybody, to lie to me?
Corey spoke. His perceptions grew wild.
To hide from me?
Yes, she called, pushing once more beneath him, finding her father's nuzzle absent again, her voice going higher. She had lied to him, or at the very least hidden the truth. That was the bond that held Corey's world together. That was the most important thing. As Corey listened, she rattled out the name of the ponies he trusted, friends he had relied on. They all been playing a game whose purpose was to keep him in shadow, a game whose purpose was to stallion get closer and closer to his daughter. Didn't they all understand? Didn't they see? Unless...
Cupcake, why would you do this to me? To our family?
He said, his voice began to fade. Because I love him! I love him, Daddy. I love him more than any stallion I've ever met, she wailed. He's kind and gentle, and when I'm near him, nothing hurts. His eyes lifted once more to Carrot Cake. He saw the stallion had his hoof raised right now where he was calling her, as though he wanted to draw her pain as he circled her father, wanted to silence her fear. He was afraid for her. Carrot was upset by her fear, more afraid for her than he was afraid of Corey himself. Corey's jaw shifted back. Carrot felt Corey stare upon him. He looked at the deep gray of the anger-filled eyes. Found it easier to look within, as though something was fighting there. The hunted look being pressed. Please, sir, said Carrot as some of the dirt fell upon him. I love her. I love her more than anything in the world. Corey, no! Came a new voice, one that ripped Corey's world out from under him. He turned and let the whip go limp as the figure of Whistling Well floated down the path, free from her wheelchair, making small, dogged steps. Mama! Oh, Mama, it's Carrot! Daddy's killing him! Came the voice of Cupcake, terribly high with worry. Oh, Mama, help me! Corey stumbled. His body shook. Whistling Well had known. She knew about all this along. She too had lied. The most important pony in his life had... No, he would not believe it. There must be another explanation. He reached for Whistling Well and tried to gather her up. To his surprise, she refused his aid. Instead, she joined in Cupcake's extortions. To his utter shock, she too began to demand he listen, trying to make her massive husband listen to the dirty, disheveled, bleeding, trembling stallion that stood nearby.
Cake,
He said as he spun the carrot. Anger seemed to be fading.
leave now. Before I do something in front of my family I'll never forgive.
No, said Carrot, still fell to his mane. No, sir, I can't. Not until you know how much I love her. Being quarry means that as two of the mares you love most in the world circle you, this stranger, this interloper, tells you how much he loves your daughter. Being quarry means that even as everything you've learned raises at you, demands acts of wrath, you can't move. It means that all the lessons you've learned in your hard life tell you to break him, snap him, that he is a liar, but that the ones you love the most demand you listen. Being quarried means that as he speaks about her, you watch his expression go soft. You listen as the thudding shows behind your ears, as he says how much he adores her, loves her. I understand, sir, Sarah said as he looked into the fainting expression of the massive stallion. I understand why you feel the way you do. I never had a father. He died just before I was born. Being quarry means that he understands what it's like feeling that you need to protect something dear to you, how powerless you feel when you cannot. Being quarry means that you could see the earth-pulling magic growing in him as he speaks of your daughter in tones that only you could. As he says that he only wants to see her happy, to see her smiling. It begins to rip away at everything you believe about your world. Called more voices, and once the grandchildren were coming up the path. Hey, Mr. Carrot, were you playing in the garden? You're all dirty. Is that Grandpa's lip? Was he selling you tricks? Being quarry means that your eldest daughter, Ruby Quartz, comes up along the path. You see realization flash across her face. Soon she too leans in to keep your wrath from growing. And you too know that she too is aware of the game, that she fears you too. Being quarry means that as dozens of your worst fears are coming to pass, you cannot call upon your familiar rage, your old anger. It means that for the first time in 42 years of relying on your brutality, you are defenseless. Being quarry means that as your daughters continue to circle you, beg for your understanding, the monster who is destroying everything you have worked for across their life makes excuses on behalf to your grandchildren. Oh yes, said Kara as he was trying to hide the blood trickling out of his ear, his nose, and long scrapes. He was just playing too hard, that's all. The name of your bakery is still a stinko, called the little cult. Yeah, answered Kara as his face twisted in suspicion. Hey, he said, why don't you guys get your school stuff off, and if your grandpa say it's okay, we can play in the garden too. Being quarry means that Cupcake leaves your side. It stands by Cake as the foals gather around him. With small cheers, the foals pelt past you in the house, the fortress you have built for the protection of your family. Being quarry means that you can now only beg. That's all you have left.
Please, Cake, please,
Quarry said while his voice broke.
Please just go.
I'm sorry, sir. I'm so sorry, said the Galleon Stallion as he turned and lifted his foreleg as he'd done for Cupcake. I can't. I just want to prove to you that I love her. I just want a chance to earn your respect. Being quarry means that the world flies through you. Respect. The one word that's all you've been chasing your life. Being quarry means having to realize that as Cupcake nuzzles beneath him and shows him her affection, the cake respects you. Respects what you would do for your family. Being quarry means that he thinks enough of you that your respect matters. Quarry lifted his head, saw the tears that Cupcake had hidden from her nieces and nephew were flowing again. Saw Cake drawing his head alongside hers and trying to draw her pain.
She's my little Cupcake. My little Cupcake.
King Quarry's voice, as weak and withdrawn as any who stood there in the spring afternoon had ever heard it. I never hurt her, sir, said Kara as he nuzzled her and lifted his eyes to Quarry. Sir, I swear, I swear I never hurt her. Being Quarry means that the gangly stallion had just shorn off all your perceptions. Cake had just cracked open all your fears and doubts with sledgehammer blows. Around you, the fortress you had built was torn away, and so he had lifted every board out of the house, and so he had stolen every stone out of the wall you had laid. Being Quarry means that your head drops under the sincere stare of the gangly stallion. Drops so low that Wishing Well and Rose Quartz gave a small cry in an attempt to nuzzle you, fearing for you. Being Quarry means that you surrender. You give up your rage, your anger, and allow this amber-colored stallion into your life. Despite the warnings that still call it within yourself, you greet him in for the sake of your little cupcake. So ended the first round of the game of this. With a massive sigh, Quarry lifted his head once more, felt Wishing Well brushing against him, attempting to lend him her strength. The frail mare stopped and looked to him with a smile. "It'll be all right, my love," she said, nuzzling her weak frame to him once more. "It'll be all right." Quarry looked at Cake. He was a bleeding, dirty mess.
All right, Cake,
he said, something of the rumbling voice returning.
"Let's get you out to the house. Clean you off. We'll have ourselves a talk."
With that, he turned and helped Wishing Well back. Behind him came the happy squeals of his youngest daughter. He could hear their two bodies fall into the garden as he pounced upon him. Hear her laughter as their noses touched together for the first time in complete freedom. Together they stood. As Wishing Well and Quarry turned to watch, something unusual happened. Carrot looked down and seemed to find one of Cupcake's hoofprints in the soft black earth. He pressed his hoof next to her imprint, leaving the two prints standing side by side in the warm soil. Soon, she had drawn a heart around both. It was hard for the stallion to admit, but it made him happy to see it. Cupcake returned to the kitchen in anticipation of an unfolding disaster. What he discovered there was the of a miracle. As he approached, he began to insert the gift within. Began to raise it up to a new foundation, a strong one built of the old interlace with many shards which he thought would be throwing away. As Carrot lifted the piece into place, Cupcake took the confectioner's tube and spread a new batch of the thickest frosting around the foundation until it was once more in place. Together they stood there, hoof and hoof, as the gingerbread house healed itself. As she looked up to him, she knew she had made a decision, and he knew to move when she could not, feared to. She knew that he trusted her to do the same. It took a lot of her willpower to keep from reaching across the house, to keep from placing her lips to his nose, and slowly lick away the frosting that still stood there. Another part of her told him that it was not yet time for such things. So as the foundation set, they simply stared at one another, happy in the presence of one another. As her train pulled to the Ponyfield station, Ivory Script was presented with an extraordinary scene. True, the banner was magnificent. The small band that played her favorite songs was so very appreciated. These were very much welcomed, as welcome as the hug of her parents that she fell into as she left from the train. But it was the sight of Carrot and Cupcake standing together, leaning into one another as Quarry stood by, that was what made her happiest. They had done it. As he reached for Cupcake, the two spun around happily, each crying and glad for the other. The party was held at the mansion, a massive celebration that marked the return of his daughter. Though Canas was a carer, it had been made very clear that Cupcake there was as a guest. She was soon to finish the season as a carer, to leave Canas who had supported her and return to the bakery alone. In the weeks that followed, she had been opening more, and Carrot stood in awe of her flowering love. As night fell, the lanterns came alight, though not nearly soon enough to keep Carrot from tripping into darkness, landing in a fountain whose warm waters kept the heat of day within them so long into the night. He tried to stand up, but as he felt the touch of her hose upon his chest, oddly, he felt her lying in those waters. Soon, Cupcake was in the water too, sitting above Carrot and looking down over him. As the lanterns came alight, he saw her sparkling in the light, saw the light catching the waters of the fountain as it trickled around them. She looked down over him in a blissful gaze and ran her mane. With that, she lifted at her hose, used them to cast up the channels of water in the space between them, and poured over them. First, Carrot had been a little perturbed, but soon he realized what was happening, what she was expressing without words. She was using the waters to show him his feelings. She was letting the waters that made up her emotions, feelings, and thoughts cascade over him. She was showing him what her love would be like, how he could expect to feel as she opened up more and more as she grew into her newfound freedom from worry. The well of souls, it is said, is like swimming through without being tired, as though you were watching love itself, as though love waters around you fill you, waters that you yourself spread through. As the waters of the fountain splashed around him, he leaned down and drew the water through his mane and across his chest. And then asked for his touch. Soon she asked for his kiss, and with that he answered. For Carrot, Sully understood what the well meant, whether it were even possible to be happier than he was in the moment. For Cupcake, the same question lingered as his warmth touched her. As they painted the scene together, the love blossomed, and a light breeze caught around them. My children, came a voice unheard that floated upon the breeze. I'm so very happy for you, so very happy. Keep this time, let your love grow. They continued, making the lanterns dance slightly around him. But know that this is not the end. The game goes on, I'm afraid. The game's not yet over, and there are new players taking the field. The breeze swirled as they lifted their heads and stared down at another with tenderness flying between them. The breeze continued speaking in an unheard tone. I am sorry, but it does. Soon you'll find that the world's not what you expect of it. And there will be pain. It'll hurt. I am so sorry, but it must be that way. For her, for who she must be. For you to become what you need to be. This is the way it must unfold. But you'll be rewarded, I swear it. Just trust to your love, and to one another. The breeze held still, other among the lanterns. With that Cupcake lowered herself to him once more. With a fine giggle, the breeze sped off over the grassy fields, where fireflies once more lit the world with trails of light. You know, I used to do these chapters all in one go when it was up to 12, 15. I think the only reason I stopped doing that was because with my career going as it is, I found myself less and less time to doing that. I mean, I still do it. I still have a set time and set hour I like to stop with. But it still amazes me that I was able to do that, or do 2-hour sittings in a row. And what's more, I'm surprised some people actually sit through these. But then again, I am always surprised about how these people who watch these videos actually sit through and actually want to view them. I don't know if it's the length or what I do. Or maybe some people say that my ranting and riffing is purely what this channel's all about. But I think you know that's not true.